What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Today, looking at the Battle of the Bays, Green Bay versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the playoffs on the line. A showcase happening at noon on Sunday Central Time in Green Bay. So first up, the injury report. Then we're going to dive into the Buccaneers, looking at them from the Packers' perspective, how they match up offense, defense, and also what are a couple keys to this game for the Green Bay Packers as they look to correct the ship while sinking the Bucs ship and actually make the playoffs this year. So in terms of that injury report, it's lengthy, but positive side, not just for the Packers this time, as the Bucs are facing a good amount of injuries themselves. So first up for the Green Bay Packers, doubtful is Christian Watson. He certainly looks in line to miss another game. Questionable, there are a bunch of Packers here. Jair Alexander, A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones, Darnell Savage, Eric Stokes, Quay Walker, Dontavian Wicks. But full go, absent from that list happens to be wide receiver Jaden Reed, who did not suffer a concussion last week. So he's good to go. Of the questionable, there's a few notable things we should talk about when it comes to Jair Alexander. Matt LaFleur was asked specifically about Jair in his press conference today. And I know there's been lots of rumors, lots of pot stirring, even by beat reporters on the team, talking about, like, is Jair just sitting out and all this kind of stuff. And today, Matt LaFleur, when asked specifically about Jair, he was asked, what does Jair have to do to get back into a game? LaFleur said he has to get to a place where he's confident in the shoulder, that he can play safe, that he can play at his level. And LaFleur, very interestingly, seemed to shove the entire thing on Jair. He didn't say that the medical staff has to see from him X, Y, Z. He didn't say that there seems to be an issue of pain when Jair makes contact from an attempted tackle. No, this was all put on to Jair as to when can he play safe, when is he confident in the shoulder. And then the reporter kind of stumbled on the next question and said, okay, what do we have to do to get confident? Are you, is he? And it was said just like that. Are you, is he? Well, which one? But regardless, Matt LaFleur just kind of looked down and went, well, he had limited practice status this week and he's questionable for Sunday. Well, that's kind of saying some stuff without saying some stuff. So it was a very interesting answer all the way around from Matt LaFleur when pressed a bit on Jair. One thing is certain, though, is LaFleur did seem to put the onus on Jair, not the medical staff, anybody else. So just something to keep in mind. I'm not stirring the pot. I'm reporting it exactly as it occurred. Now, as for A.J. Dillon, he does have, by all accounts, LaFleur still is kind of shady about confirming it, but it looks like a broken thumb. When asked today if he could still grip a football, LaFleur said, yeah, we're working on that. That's encouraging. Aaron Jones does seem to be trending in the right direction, although LaFleur admitted that it was a very easy week of practice, lots of walkthroughs, jog-throughs coming off of Monday Night Football, as is typical. So we'll see if Aaron Jones can go. Darnell Savage is one that I don't have a lot of faith going. He did not practice at all this week. Now, for the Buccaneers, as I said, they've got their own list. Out, starting cornerback Carlton Davis. That's a big loss for their defense. Also out happens to be rotational defensive lineman Will Golston. That certainly hurts their run defense. Of the doubtful variety, that would be safety Ryan Neal, a starter there, and then also one of the best interior defensive linemen in football, Vita Vea. So that would be a huge loss. All four of them. Big loss for Tampa Bay's defense. In the questionable category, they have Jamel Dean, Chris Godwin, Zach Triner, their long snapper, and then also inside linebacker Devin White. All of them, however, were full participants today. No limited practices for the Bucs today. All of them were full, which means they're probably on the positive side of questionable. So those four, it's pretty safe bet that they'll be playing. And then just to keep in mind, as we're talking about the Buccaneers, they do have two guys on long-term IR. One will be starting center, Ryan Jensen. The other wide receiver, Russell Gage. Now, how are the Buccaneers doing this year? They find themselves in a very similar position to the Green Bay Packers, both teams of which 6-7. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their wins have come against the Vikings, Bears, Saints, Titans, Panthers, and Falcons. Their losses against the Eagles, Lions, Falcons, Bills, Texans, 49ers, and Colts. Yes, they split their season series against the Falcons. And they are coming off of a couple wins that have pushed them back atop the NFC South for right now. They are coached by Todd Bowles, offensive coordinators Dave Canales, and then defensive. It's not as simple as just having a D coordinator. They kind of split the job. They've got a pass guy and they got a run guy. Well, their defensive pass coordinator would be Larry Foote, former inside linebacker for the Steelers, amongst other teams, kind of a rising star in the coaching world. And then their defensive run coordinator would be Casey Rogers. By the way, got in the question of bunts, if the Packers aren't going to retain Joe Barry, who's one guy that you wouldn't mind bringing in as defensive coordinator? And one of those answers happens to be Larry Foote. Now, would he take the job in Green Bay? Would he switch basically from a coordinator job to another? I don't know. I'm just saying he is one that I would certainly have my eye on. So let's talk how these Buccaneers are different from last year's. And in other podcasts, when they get to this section about the Packers, this is a lengthy section. There's no Aaron Rodgers. There's no friends of Aaron Rodgers, right? Most of them are gone. The Buccaneers are in the exact same boat. They also moved on from their legendary quarterback as Tom Brady retired. Also retiring was Rob Gronkowski. But it's not just those two. They also lost Sean Murphy-Bunting from their secondary, Akeem Hicks from the defensive line, and Carl Nassib from their defensive front. But they added, to help make up for some of those, they added starting quarterback Baker Mayfield and starting safety Ryan Neal, who very well might miss the game. In terms of draft contributors, they've really got four guys who are playing substantial snaps. One would be their first-round pick, interior defensive lineman Kalijah Kancey, who basically has found himself as a starter for the majority of the year. Their second-round pick, someone that most people loved for Green Bay, Cody Munch. He's been starting a guard for them all year and is playing quite well. One of their better offensive linemen for sure. Third round, they got Yaya Diaby, the edge rusher out of Louisville. He's been pretty much starting at edge for them, kind of in a rotation with another guy, but certainly getting a good number of snaps. And then their sixth round pick, Trey Palmer, has actually been playing starters worthy snaps at wide receiver with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans for sixth round pick. Darn impressive, even if Russell Gage is on IR. So, offensively, where exactly do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers rank? And again, this week I'm going to give you their full season total, but then also where they've been over the last 3 weeks, because realistically, we're at the point in the year now where trends matter, not just the full season picture. So I'm going to give you both. In terms of passing yards per game, they get 214.4 passing yards per game. That's 20th in the NFL. Over the last three, that number has dropped to 169.7, 28th in the NFL. Rushing yards per game, they get 90 rushing yards per game, 29th in the NFL. And 133.7 over the last three. That's 11th in the NFL. The Buccaneers started running the ball more, and what we've seen is they've actually had more success there as of late. Not really equating. They've been much more balanced over the last 3 weeks. In terms of scoring, they were putting up 20.2, or all season, I should say, putting up 20.2 points per game, 22nd in the NFL. But over the last three, they've seen a slight uptick up to 23.3 points per game. Their run game, like just general overview with Rachaad White, it actually kind of mirrors the Packers pretty well. One difference for the Buccaneers is Rachaad White was always going to be their number one guy. Packers haven't had Aaron Jones and have been playing A.J. Dillon, and then a very, very beat up version of A.J. Dillon, mixing in Patrick Taylor as he's come and gone amongst others. But still, there's been great difficulties, yet better as of late, partially as the team has actually done the thing more. So very similar in that regard. But on the whole, the offense for the Buccaneers seemingly goes as Baker Mayfield goes. On the year, his total stats, 62.6% completion, 2,935 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And the big thing with Baker Mayfield, like the big thing as to why there's no conversations in Tampa about his starting job, like has seemingly plagued him everywhere he's gone in his career, is he's playing cleaner and more efficient, probably than at any other point in his career. And also for the sake of balance, like if you really want to get Star Wars here, he's perfectly balanced per PFF with 17 big-time throws on the year and 17 turnover-worthy plays. As for where he spreads the ball around, he's a much better thrower to the left side of the field than the right. And it's not just like, oh, well, yeah, because that's where Mike Evans goes. Mike Evans actually moves around a little bit more than I thought when I dove into the numbers. About 25% of Mike Evans' snaps are coming from the slot. Nonetheless, though, regardless of who's over there, his numbers are drastically better when throwing left than throwing to the right. A great example is on throws over 20 yards. When targeting the left, throwing over 20 yards, he's got a QB rating of 96.3. To the right, 41.2. To the middle, 35.1. And all of them are within 2 attempts of each other. So it's not like, well, yeah, he's thrown one bomb to the left and he throws to the right. No, like it's pretty spread. He's just really good to the left and not good to the center or the right. But where he attempts the most is perhaps what I'm most concerned about, because over the middle and within 10 yards of the field is where he targets the most. And if you are an individual who happens to check out our watch parties regularly, you know that a gigantic pet peeve of mine when it comes to the Packers defense is the fact that they seemingly give up all of those simple little pass plays every single week, whether it's the first quarter, fourth quarter, doesn't matter. If it's just over the line of scrimmage, Packers are probably giving it up. And then if the player has any type of yak ability or any type of separation, it can grow into a big play quickly. And that happens to be where Baker targets the most. And we've seen, kind of in conjunction, chicken and egg maybe, Rachaad White has rapidly become a legitimate pass catcher out of the backfield for the Bucs, amongst the league leaders for running backs in receptions, yards, etc., etc. When targeting that exact section of the field, middle and within 10 yards, Baker Mayfield is 81 for 102 for 726 yards with 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, and a QB rating of over 105. Keep that in mind, 726 yards of his nearly 3,000, just one tiny little chunk of the field. Now, let's take a look at the Buccaneers defense, and it still is certainly a big name collection over there, but it's just not performing like the reputation may suggest. So in terms of passing yards per game, they've been struggle bussing. 264.1 passing yards per game given up. That's 30th in the NFL. Over the last 3 weeks, 242, still 24th in the NFL. Rushing per game, they give up 98.8 rushing yards per game. That's 10th in the NFL. Over the last 3, 128. That's 25th in the NFL. Yeah, it got worse. Scoring, they give up 20.8 points per game, 13th in the NFL. Over the last 3, 23.3. Good for 23rd in the NFL. So when looking at this defense, there's just a couple big thoughts, but one, I want to give a special shout out to Antoine Winfield, who truly has ascended to being one of the best safeties in football, both against the pass and the run this year. He has been everywhere for them as this Bucs defense has been injury riddled and has frankly had some underperformers. But with that being said, the Bucs are basically the anti-Packers when it comes to defense. Packers are amongst the league leaders in passing yards per game and terrible at running yards per game, as we all know. Well, the Bucs are the exact flip, but yet they both wind up in very similar places. In terms of defensive points per game, they both hover around 20 points per game allowed. And it is really important to note, too, for this one particular week, with potentially 4 preferred defensive starters out for the Buccaneers, whatever version the Packers get could be drastically different than what we've seen for the majority of the year. I mean, Carlton Davis is leading all of their corners and snaps. All of a sudden, he might be out. Will Golston on their defensive line. Ryan Neal, starting center. Vita Vea, defensive lineman. Like, that's a lot of snaps that could be potentially out of this game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I will say, too, if Vita Vea is not able to play, because as good as Winfield is, VA might still even be a more impactful defender than him. The Packers' interior offensive line matches up much, 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 much better against the Buccaneers without having to face VA. So what I should say too, like take Winfield out of it, take VA out of it. The Buccaneers still have a number of big name players, Levante David, Devin White, like Shaquille Barrett, like big names on that defense from when they were so good a few years ago. But a couple of them aren't performing up to that standard. Great example, Devin White, having a terrible year by PFF standards with a cumulative grade of only 39.2. Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, both each considered over the last 3 years to be up-and-coming cornerbacks. Maybe this one will be the next great one. Maybe this one will be the next great one. It's the conversation's been around both of them for little stretches of time, and yet neither one, at least in terms of coverage, seems to really be fulfilling that potential in becoming a true bona fide alpha corner for long durations of time. I will say, though, Jamel Dean is a menace, incredibly good at defending the run from the cornerback spot. And that kind of goes to the next point. The Buccaneers do better than almost anyone in the NFL. Tackling. Like, they're really good at tackling. When I look at tackling numbers each week, generally every team has multiple starters over 20% with missed tackle rates. Well, not the Bucs. They've got one. And it's rookie edge rusher Yaya Diaby, who doesn't even play every snap because he's in a rotation. In fact, of their preferred starters on defense, 4 of them have rates even over 10%. Everyone else is under 10%. Most teams that we go against, even the Packers included, they've got like 2, maybe 3 guys under 10% with their missed tackle rates. The Bucs have 7. They are very, very good at tackling and bringing down the ball carrier. Much better than any team the Packers have gone against all year. And that explains the run defense number for the Bucs. So let's take a look at a few other numbers before getting onto our keys. In terms of turnover margin, the Bucs are averaging there in the positive, just like the Packers. They're sitting at positive 0.5 per game, 6th in the NFL. In terms of sacks per game, they get 2.9 sacks per game, 10th in the NFL. Getting sacked per game, 2.2. That's 9th in the NFL. They do protect Baker pretty well. In terms of penalties per game, well, Tampa Bay gets 6.3 penalties per game. That's 18th in the NFL. And the Packers, I'm happy to report the Packers, they're getting better here. They're not over 7 anymore. They're at 6.9. So the Green Bay Packers, 29th in the NFL in that regard. In terms of plays per game, again, 2 incredibly similar teams. Tampa Bay is getting off 61.5 plays per game, 22nd in the NFL. Green Bay, 61.4, 23rd in the NFL. But special teams, get ready to throw a party because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on PFF, because I've been using that for special teams grades, they have a special teams grade of 64.8. That's 30th in the NFL. The Green Bay Packers, 73.5. That's 19th. The Packers are going against a team that they're better at special teams than. So let's talk keys. Obviously, the whole thing is going to be about special teams. But number 1, close down the middle of the field with your front. I understand Mike Evans is there. Chris Godwin is there. 2 incredibly good wide receivers. And that's going to lead a lot of people to really believe, well, this is the kind of week that the Packers should actually play like they did against Mahomes and back up like this. This is the kind of game for Joe Barry. I disagree. Yes, Evans is there. Yes, Godwin is there. Yes, they are both incredibly good. But, and Evans is putting together a very, very strong season, another 1,000-yard plus season. Don't get me wrong. But this is not the kind of game that I want to see Quay Walker and Campbell backed up in zone coverage and have White run right past them. It's where the Bucs have arguably their most success. I'm not worried about the Bucs running for 200 yards because they're not going to do that with Rachaad White, you would think. I'm not necessarily even worried about Baker Mayfield scrambling like Tommy DeVito did. He's not as agile as DeVito. And you'd also hope that the Packers just wouldn't let that happen again. But where the Bucs seem to have success is dink and dunk. And if they allowed Baker to do that in perhaps his most efficient year of his career, that could get rough quickly for the Packers defense. They cannot make it easy for the Buccaneers offense. Number 2, the offensive key, air it out. Yeah, if he's out, of course it's going to be easier to run the ball than if he were in. But the Bucs are excellent tacklers. They're not excellent in coverage. And they might be missing half of their starting secondary. Even with Watson out, even with Musgrave out. This absolutely, positively better not be another game where the average throw for Jordan Love is right around the line of scrimmage or behind it. This needs to be a game where they actually air it out. Let's see that aggressive average depth of target that we saw earlier in the year from Jordan Love and company, even without Watson, even without Musgrave. Send Reed with his speed. He doesn't have to just be a dude who does 14 jet sweeps a game. Send his speed a little bit more down the field and stretch with somebody else. I know Watson's not there. It's not good enough to just be like, well, let's run a 2-yard offense instead. You can run a deep offense against the Bucs, and I would expect that that's what the Packers should do. So basically, if you're wondering, keys 1 and 2, do the exact opposite of what you did against the Giants. It really is that simple in a lot of different ways. Key number 3, the final key for this game, it may come down to Carlson. See, Chase McLaughlin for the Bucs, he's not going to miss. He's perfect on extra points this year, 25-25, and he's hit 91% of his field goals. And as big of an Anders Carlson fan and supporter as I am, if he plays like he has in recent weeks where every single field goal is a cardiac event or it's a miss, this may not tilt the Packers' way. So, in terms of my final prediction, The Bucs and Packers are incredibly similar places of being an organization right now. Realistically, the Packers are down farther the path of a rebuild because of their youth, because of money, etc., than the Bucs are. But still, two teams moving on from legendary quarterbacks while having strong enough franchises to still potentially make the playoffs this year, as they are both currently slated to do. And the other thing that I'll say too, both teams have been ridiculously inconsistent this year. Really high highs, great games, marred with complete duds the next week. This isn't the Bucs of old. It's certainly not the Bucs of 2020. So I like the way that the Packers match up better against the Bucs than the Bucs do against the Packers. I think the Packers do the important stuff or the explosive stuff better, or the stuff that really matters better than the Bucs do, with the exception of tackling. I will say, though, that this game probably comes down to which version of the Packers actually show up. Is it going to be the Chiefs version, or is it going to be the Giants version? Or is it going to be somewhere in between? Because that may ultimately dictate how the game goes. I have a really hard time believing that Matt LaFleur in December at home with playoffs on the line are going to lay 2 duds in a row. It is time to get back on track, and the Packers should be able to exploit the Bucs' weaknesses. So let's call this game for the Packers 24, Bucs 20. I will be doing a watch party on Sunday on YouTube. So if you haven't checked it out yet, please do. Sunday at noon for the game. I'll be here, just me for half one. Claudia joining us for half number 2. But I do hope you are having a sensational week. Hope you have a great weekend ahead. I'll see you on Sunday at the watch party. And as always, and most importantly, go Pack Go.